Welcome to the Hard Skills Show, where we discuss how to develop the nuanced hard skills, meaning the most challenging soft skills needed to make a real impact through your leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Mira Brancu. I'm a leadership consulting and coaching psychologist, founder of the TowerScope Leadership Academy, an associate professor, a Psychology Today columnist, author of the Millennials Guide to Workplace Politics, and I had my own leadership career before transitioning to helping teams and high achieve women navigate their leadership complexities. Thank you for joining us today. Now, on to the focus of our episode today. We talk a lot about managing up. What is this concept about? Why is it so important? What does it look like when it's successful? How can you navigate these complex office politics? Now, you all know, if you know me, you know I'm obsessed with workplace politics and navigating them. I wrote a book on it, right? And managing up is a critical but often misunderstood piece of it. And that's why we have Roberta Matuson on today, because she is the expert on this. So I'm super excited to have her on. It's a great topic for season 4's focus on navigating complexity. Before I formally introduce you to her, I just want to remind you again, if you haven't been listening, that applications are now open through July 19th for the fall 2024 cohort of our TowerScope Leadership Academy. The Academy focuses on building a community of high-achieving, growth-minded leaders looking to expertly navigate today's complex workplace challenges within disrupted industries and make a greater impact. Who is right for this, you might ask? Well, if you are experiencing a tension between your expectations, organizational culture, your values, this is the right community for you. If you're feeling blindsided by workplace politics, a desire to be more intentional and strategic, a desire to feel more effective in your leadership journey, or you're ambivalent or concerned about your leadership trajectory, this is a structured learning community that will help you take reflective pauses to support your next steps. You can learn more about it at our open house on July 15th, or directly apply at www.gotowerscope.com and click on Leadership Academy. Okay, with no further ado, I'm excited to introduce our special guest today, Roberta Matuson. Roberta is an expert in maximizing talent. She is the author of 7 books on leadership, including the 3rd edition of Suddenly in Charge, Managing Up, Managing Down, Succeeding All Around. She's also an executive coach who works with leaders in Fortune 500 companies and emerging businesses. And she and I connected through the Recognized Expert Community, Dory Clark's Recognized Expert Community, where there are many writers, but she stands out as someone who really focuses on this area of leadership, the managing up, managing down, succeeding all around. So are you ready? Let's get started. Get out your pens and paper if you're a pen and paper person, which I am, or just get out your devices to start taking notes, reflecting deeply. Identify at least one small step from what you learned from her today to develop your hard skills muscle. Welcome and great to have you on the show, Roberta. And if you can unmute, we'll have you join us. Yes.
Am I here now?
Yes, you are. Welcome.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here and to be heard.
Absolutely. Yes. We also indoctrinated her into our radio show, by the way, because she's not used to I guess radio shows and podcasts where we're a little silly before we get started. The engineer and I were getting really silly beforehand. So anyway, that's us. Roberta, what do you want our audience to learn from you today about?
Well, I mean, I love the topic because, like you, this topic is near and dear to my heart. I've been, in this space for quite a while. As you mentioned, it's the 3rd edition of Suddenly in Charge that was released in April. And the 1st edition I wrote was over 10 years ago. So, and like you, I have spent time in organizations as a leader, and where I've experienced what it was like to be suddenly in charge, as well as also experiencing the politics that went on around me. Although, quite frankly, I had no idea at the time that it was happening. But the one thing I want people to just keep in mind as we have our conversation is if you don't manage up, which also requires you learning how to navigate politics, you're not going to have to manage, you're not going to have to worry about managing down because in all likelihood, you won't be there.
Mm. Well, if that isn't a strong endorsement for learning how to do this, that is it. Let me ask you, you mentioned that this is really near and dear to your heart as well. So that must mean, like me, you've had your own interesting journey and experiences with this that led you to be interested. Can you share a little bit more about your personal experiences with this?
Sure. Well, when I was 24 years old, I walked into my boss's office and only to find out that she wasn't there. And it turns out she was fired. So I
Mm.
was called into the president's office and he told me this news. And I did what I thought any other 24-year-old would do. I asked for her job and they actually gave it to me, which was insane at the time. But I was 24. I figured I knew how to be a leader. I certainly knew everything there was to know about managing a human resource function. Again, because I was 24 and I had worked
Mhm.
for a year, maybe
Uh-huh.
two. And but what I didn't see was the wave that took me out. I got taken out by a wave I didn't see coming, and remarkably, I lasted 6 years. So, I mean, that I'm proud of.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say a wave, what kind of things did you see?
Well, I foolishly focused so much on the tactics, the everyday tasks in front of me that I failed to build relationships. You know, of course, when you're 24 years old and everyone else is considerably older on the executive team, and you're one of two women on that team, you would expect that there would be daggers being thrown at you. But again, being young and not knowing that, I thought, well, everyone was really excited for me. No,
Yeah.
they weren't excited that I had like a brand new, beautiful corner office, which they had worked really hard to get, for
Mhm.
years. I had the best reserve parking spot in the parking garage. Unbelievable. I mean, these are things that at that time were really important and a sign of status. And, at some point you realize that maybe not everybody is excited about your success. And so you have to cultivate those relationships and bring people along and show them that you're not just, whatever. You haven't just been given that job because you're a friend of someone.
Yeah, absolutely. This reminds me of slightly similar reason for why I got interested in workplace politics and writing about it. And for those of you who have not been sort of listening to the show or heard this before, early in my career, same around the same age, 23, 24, 25, super early in my career, different profession altogether. And it dawns on me that it was this kind of the same stemming from not building sufficient relationships with the people that I needed to. I did have good relationships with my supervisor and some of my peers, but I was a little too bold myself, and I went to the leader of this organization to share all of my opinions about why I thought what they were doing was unethical and wrong. And maybe they wanted to talk with me about it and hear some articles about it. Like it was just absurd looking back on, what I was doing. But at the time I was like, I'm just trying to be helpful to help them avoid risk. And isn't that great of me? And, but I really did not appreciate, number one, that we didn't have that kind of trusting relationship for me to do that. And second, I wasn't privy to all of the challenges that the leader was facing to get to that point that they made that decision. I wasn't in those rooms. So I think what we're going to get to some of that stuff in a little bit. I'm also curious, you mentioned that you wrote your first edition 10 years ago. And that means that you had a second edition and you now have this third edition, that means that you noticed enough changes that you felt like it was important to have a refresher. I'm really curious to hear, what changes did you notice over time that you wanted to add a second and a third refresher to the book?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I'm going to correct what I said because I wrote the first book in 2010, and time has stood still for me. Obviously,
Oh,
I lost
yeah.
years. Okay.
Yeah, totally. We all have.
So, I mean, the second edition was just to polish things up. Life had definitely changed, like the pendulum had swung. I think at that point, there were probably a lot more, like, I think the economy had swung and maybe there weren't that many jobs and people felt like, well, I have to suffer through this. And I was giving them guidance on how to do that. But most recently, as a result of the pandemic, everything really changed. And I remember a number of years ago being asked by one of the major publishers to put together a book proposal on remote work. I thought that was the most boring topic I had ever heard. I know nothing about this. I don't know anyone doing this, like whatever. And I put it together. And then a part of me was just crossing my fingers saying, please let them not pick me. And it was interesting because what they did was they came back and they said, this isn't they asked me for the proposal. It was their idea. And then they came back and said, this is kind of a boring topic. We're going to see if we can get somebody who is just really like who's doing it in their organization to write this book. And I thought, thank God. But I didn't know that 4 years later, 3 or 4 years later, we would all be remote. So when I had the opportunity, because my second book, I would say things in the book, I would write, you cannot do this over the phone, or you need to you need to fly out and have this conversation. And then all of a sudden we couldn't do those things.
Yeah.
So I was feeling like the book was wasn't aging well. And so I approached the publisher and said, it's time, we need a third edition. And they agreed.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I feel like now as a result, it's not just, working in a remote or hybrid environment as a result of, let's say, working for a global organization. It's also the ways in which we've sort of changed and adjusted to work to be more flexible, that it makes it even harder to have good conversations, trusting relationships, develop those, which leads to a lot of complex interaction. So when we're reaching an ad break, when we come back, let's explore a little bit about what is managing up actually. There are a lot of people that have different definitions of this or don't even know what it is. So I'd love to hear more from you in particular. How do you define managing up versus managing sideways versus managing down? And then, maybe some changes that you've seen over time that has added to the complexity and what we do about it. Okay. Sure. So we're hearing that ad break. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest, Roberta Matuson. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. If you'd like to join us online right now, live, and ask us questions in real time, please do so. We are on LinkedIn. We're on YouTube at talkradio.nyc. We're airing right now, and we're happy to answer your questions in real time. Otherwise, we'll be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Branco, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to the hard skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Roberta Matuson, where we're talking about all things managing up, managing sideways, managing down. And we're first going to start with the basics, the foundations. What is managing up, Roberta? How would you define it? Where are the misunderstandings and myths around it? Tell us everything.
Well, my definition of managing up is managing your boss and those above you so that you can get the resources you need for yourself and for your people. And I think that the real misconception about the topic of managing up is people think it's brown nosing. They're like, oh, you want to be the boss's favorite. No, it's really effective relationship building so that when resources are tight, you can take care of your people.
Yeah. Now, I wonder how some supervisors and leaders see this from their perspective. I'm pretty sure that the message isn't manage them because they're annoying or difficult and manipulate them into doing what you want them to do, right?
No, but you should manage them if they're difficult. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what's the difference between sort of misusing the relationship and using it appropriately when you're managing up?
Well, I mean, look, I think everyone can tell when you're trying to get in the boss's favor. So this is not about manipulation. This is about building a relationship, and this takes time and this takes effort so that when you do need something and you ask for it, you will get it. So, for example, if you need more staff and there's a hiring freeze and your boss knows, like, man, this person, they don't ask for anything. They must really need this. Because you've built that relationship, because you've deposited those coins in the relationship bank, there's a very good chance that you'll get what you ask for. And in return, that will make it easier for your team because now they're not all putting in all these hours and they know that you have their best interest in mind.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a moment, because sometimes we don't have the best relationship with our bosses, even though we've tried. And so if you get somebody coming to you saying, I've tried everything and I can't, I feel like I'm at a loss with my boss, how do I get around them, or how do I address the situation? What are some of the sort of first things you start wondering about or exploring with them?
Well, let me just say this. I mean, you do have options, okay? One of them is you can make your boss look so good, he or she gets promoted, okay? And you'll be the boss. So that's a strategy you can use. Another strategy is you can, ask to move into a different department for more exposure. So you may feel like you're stuck, but you're not. And then, of course, there's the strategy of finding a new opportunity elsewhere. But, a lot of times you may think that your boss comes to work every day with the idea, gee, how can I make her life miserable, right? But chances are that's really not the story. So, if you're able to, and I write about this in my book, Can We Talk, which is all about difficult conversations. if you're able to address your boss in a respectful way and point out to this individual with, evidence, and not as if you're in a courtroom, but just, hey, here are some examples of what I'm feeling or seeing, then you can have a conversation and you can start to see if you can build a relationship with this person. Now, I have worked for like the worst boss on the planet. So I know I've had that experience. So your boss might be the second worst boss, but there's no way you're going to match this individual. And honestly, it was interesting because I found myself, a friend of mine said to me, "Oh, you should meditate." Like, okay, well, I'm from New York. We don't meditate in New York, And I'm like, okay, I'll try it. That's how desperate I was. And when I realized like I didn't want to spend my evenings like, on a yoga mat going, that I'd rather take salsa dancing lessons during that time, that's when I got out of there. So
Yeah. So how do you assess whether it's worth trying to manage up and continue trying because it's more about like getting to learn about the manager's style versus this is so unhealthy, it's not worth trying, I gotta go, I gotta get out of here?
Well, I think everybody knows what their limits are. I mean, there are toxic bosses and there are toxic cultures and there are toxic workplaces. And if you happen to land in one, you're not going to change that no matter what you do. And you have to put your health first. So, everybody just has to evaluate for themselves. If you're the only person on your team that feels this way, well, maybe there is maybe it is you, but then again, perhaps you're being discriminated against and that's why you feel this way. So there are factors, but you've got to step back and do a reality check and say, just like when you're a manager, right? You have to do a reality check and say, how much more effort am I going to put into this non-performer that's on my team? At what point am I going to cut the cord? Well, as an employee, you have to ask yourself, how much effort, how much bandwidth do I have to try to resolve this? Or am I better off just going someplace else and becoming, getting into a more sane environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that, thinking around recognizing when you're the only person experiencing it and whether it's discrimination or not. That's kind of like a decision point. Or is everyone experiencing it? They're on the same page experiencing this bad feeling. That's a data point, right? And some other data points are have I tried in the first place? Like have I tried to understand what my manager needs and wants and what their best ways of communicating are? Or do I insist in my way? And am I sort of getting kind of a little entrenched in the way that I want to see things or do things or whatever? Some of us, do start only being able to see things from our perspective and not from somebody else's. So have I actually tried? And all of those are just data points to help you decide, is this the right environment for me or not? And if it is, then am I willing to try a few things out, whether that is directly with my boss, like you said, or finding other opportunities within the same system to see what happens if I move to a different area. Now, in your book, you also talk about some no-nos. What no-nos are there for managing up? Are there things we shouldn't be trying or doing, or things that could get in our way or sabotaging our success?
We shouldn't be trying to manage up too high, right?
Ah,
So if you're a
yeah,
mid-level,
like I did.
going to your boss's boss's boss and seeing if you can have lunch with the president may not work well for you, or going
Yeah.
above your boss's head and starting to build a relationship with somebody who he or she's been trying to build a relationship with. It may not be cool, So it's really trying to stay, within your area. You can go up a level, that's fine, because you want those relationships so that your boss's peers respect you, and that can help propel your whole department forward. But I wouldn't try to go up too high.
Yeah, yeah. It's one thing to want to develop relationships with people or, across the system, and that makes perfect sense. It's a good idea. You can't just rely on one person to, have your back, see all your value, promote you every single time. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to you. On the other hand, it does there is something that feels a little off when you're sort of going to the boss's boss, and it makes everybody sort of question your intention if you haven't at least tried managing directly, up to your boss first, at the very least, right? If not the next level up.
Right. And of course, if your boss is doing something illegal, I mean, all bets are off.
Right.
Go right
Yes.
ahead, go up to the top if that's what's required. Just understand that you may not come back, but that's okay. At least you've got your ethics still.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that, you have to think about your integrity and ethics too. That's really important. Yeah. So
Yeah.
then,
And that's easier to do when you're not like the sole support of either yourself or your family, right? So,
yeah, that is a good point. That there is a decision-making point about, like, is this all worth it? And what can I accept as my reality now and work towards a different reality over time if I have very little room for adjusting or changing my situation right now.
mhm.
Yeah. So then do you have some best practices, maybe like your top 3 best practices or ways to succeed when managing up when somebody is going to be thinking about this?
Well, I think you have to first decode your boss. Like, what kind of boss do you have? And in the book, I talk about 4 different kinds of bosses. There are dictatorial bosses who are just going to, yell orders. They're the bureaucratic boss who, follows the rules, even if they don't make sense. Couple of other different kinds. So you have to kind of decode and see what is my boss's style here and understand that sometimes there's going to be some crossover. Your bosses all aren't going to fit into these 4 pretty boxes. But once you've determined that, I provide a lot of guidance in the book on, okay, for example, if you have a bureaucratic boss, you follow those rules. You learn the rules, you follow the rules. If you can't work in that kind of environment, then get out. And I could not work in that kind of environment. So, you got to know yourself. So that's one piece of advice. I also think it's really important, when you're managing up to ask for what you need. And if you feel like you're ready and you need a promotion, you should go ask for it. Don't wait.
Those are really good. Yeah. And, a lot of us don't necessarily always know what we need of a boss. We have this sort of like vision of a perfect boss, and which they don't exist. I wasn't a perfect boss, like we all have our faults as leaders, and we all have our ways of doing things. So it's all about, like, do we mesh, right? And later on, I learned, when I changed professions and I was interviewing at another place, and they called my current boss and they said, what would Mira need? What is the right environment? And he said, you need to give her a vision and get out of her way. And I didn't actually know that about me, but, like, it was helpful to learn that would provide me with a good boss for me. And that is something that now I learn and realize when I go on other interviews, or when I'm thinking about, like, who would be a good leader in terms of my style and how I mesh with them. And that's one of the sort of things that I think about. Like, if I tend to feel a little too micromanaged, I'm going to feel stifled, and I'm going to feel like I don't have enough room to be able to succeed implementing the thing that they asked me to implement, right? So it's just a matter of, like, getting to know yourself well enough and getting to know your boss well enough to know how you can succeed together.
Yes,
Right.
I think it's also, especially for our younger listeners, the first time out, you're not going to know what works. And then the next time you're going to be like, oh, I don't want this kind of boss. Okay. And then the next time you're going to be like, oh, I really would like this kind of boss. You're going to get better at picking bosses. Just like when you're dating, you make better choices, hopefully, the longer you date.
Exactly. Okay, we are nearing an ad break again. And when we come back, Roberta, I have a couple of scenarios that come up often. I'd love to share with you and see what you think about those scenarios. So let's chew on those right after we come back. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest today, Roberta Matuson. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you are watching live, feel free to ask us questions live and we will answer live on YouTube or LinkedIn at talkradio.nyc. And we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the Nonprofit Sector Connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with today, Roberta Matuson. And one of the most common things I get asked about, I have two that I'd like to share with you and see what you think about them. The first one is that sometimes, like maybe what happened with you and me, you get promoted very quickly, very fast, and over your peers. And sometimes even over your own bosses. And it creates a very awkward kind of situation. And I'm curious, like, how do you see the changes, adjustments, or things you need to be thinking about with managing up, down, to the side, all around when that happens?
Well, first you have to remember that the people that were your peers, you're now their boss, and they're probably not going to invite you to have lunch with them, okay? The relationship is going to change. And so the first piece of advice that I give to my coaching clients when they're in that situation is, go on to Facebook and unfriend them, okay? And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just like, you don't need them to see your posts when you pull up in your brand new BMW, because you got this big raise, like there are things, your life is going to change. You're going to be in a different place than they may be. And the good news about Facebook, and I don't know about Instagram or anything else, is that when you unfriend someone, they don't get a notice. Okay. So that's the good news. But your relationship will change, and you have to get really clear with them and just set the guidelines and say, listen, you and I, we've said some things in the past about management. I can assure you, I'm not going to be sharing those. Okay.
Mm.
Going forward, I will ask you not to share those things with me, because if you do, and it's something that I need to share with upper management, I'm going to have to do that. So let's just agree to not do that. So I think it's really important to just set the guidelines.
Yeah, I really like that. Not, you don't think about doing that with people that you consider your friends, right? Like some of your peers you've turned into friends and you've hung out and you know a lot about each other. And that creates a situation where you really have to trust each other that you won't use that stuff against each other, and being able to have an open, honest conversation about how to move forward with the information from the past. Very powerful.
Well, it's important because
Yeah.
otherwise your friend's going to be like, why did you tell your boss that? I told you that in confidence.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute, that's not what our agreement was. So,
Right.
you
And,
know,
they would be wise to, sort of engage in that kind of thoughtful conversation, because you're now also in a position to continue supporting them and helping them when they might be interested in a promotion, a future opportunity. And so it's like, don't burn the bridges, but let's have some guidelines about a professional relationship where we're not harming each other, we're helping each other, we're supporting each other in professional ways.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. The second scenario is so a lot of people ask me about how to manage wanting to speak up and be authentic to their voice,
Mhm.
right? But feeling like they're either annoying their boss by sharing concerns when they see concerns, or that they're speaking up too much, or that it's not wanted, or that it's not their place, or worry that they'll be put back into their place. How do you what advice do you give when it comes to the tension between managing up or down, but mostly managing up, um, but also sort of managing the tension with um, speaking up versus not speaking up, the timing of that, the appropriateness of what you want to share versus not share when you, especially when you're concerned about leadership decisions, management decisions.
Well, I mean, obviously it's going to depend on the decision, right? So if the decision is to swap out, Seattle's best coffee for Starbucks, maybe just let it go. Bring your own coffee. I mean, those are not like life-changing for most people decisions. But if you really think that it's going to put the company in harm's way, you can just say to your boss, I have some concerns. I don't know how, would you like me to share them with you? Do you prefer I just put them in an email? Like, how do you want me to communicate this to you? Or you just want me to let it go and you just assume you got this, even though you don't know what this is.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would just it's every situation is really going to change. It's going to depend on what the situation is.
I really appreciate that. So what I'm picking up on that is pick your battles. Not enough people pick their battles. Um, ask for permission to offer advice. Don't offer it unsolicited, right? And then when you do ask permission, maybe ask the format and method that would be best received, right? So that you're not deciding, well, this is a public forum. I should just speak up right now, even though it's not on their agenda at all. And I'm sure they'll appreciate it because I'm speaking up.
Right. And I just love rhetorical permission. Like if you're talking one-on-one with your boss, I would just say, with your permission, I'd like to share some things with you. And what are they going to do? Say no? But if you
Right.
say, you know, um, is it okay if I share some things with you? They may go, no, I don't want to hear it.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. It honestly, it reminds me of the talk that I had with my daughter the other day. And, I was nervous to ask her this question because she had already bit my head off before about asking
Oh,
the
yeah.
question. And so I first said, can I ask you a question without you getting too mad at me?
Oh, I've done that, and that's not a good way to go.
And normally she just sort of relaxes, like, okay, I got it. You want me to brace myself without chewing your head off. Got it. Okay.
Well,
but it
I've
is
learned
an entryway.
I have
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
daughter as well, and I've learned I don't do that anymore. I'm like, with your permission, I'd like to kind of tell you what I'm thinking. And
Mhm.
she's like, okay.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's just a matter of getting to understand the other person's preferences and what causes them to react negatively or positively to an introduction to a conversation. But at
And it's
least
about
creating
time,
an
right?
introduction. Yeah.
It's
Go
about
ahead.
time. I mean, if your boss is, it's Friday afternoon, she's packing up, she's trying to catch the ferry, and you're like, well, I'd really like to talk to you about something. And it's not the right time.
Yeah.
It's just not, you got to pick your time as well as, your battles.
Yeah. Yeah. With your daughter or your boss, if they look irritable, maybe not
Walk
now. Maybe not now.
And that's what's so interesting. When I wrote Suddenly in Charge, my kids were, I don't know, maybe, 8 and 10. Today they're in the workplace. So,
Mm,
I've learned a lot.
yes.
And like, 5 books in between. So it's sort of like, okay, I'm going to share my newfound knowledge with the people who are reading my books. So yeah,
Yeah.
you learn. And I think, for those of your listeners who are parents, I think that there's a lot of similarities between, managing your home and your family and managing the people in the office.
Totally. I mean, there are relationships, right? It's managing relationships. Out of curiosity, since we've been sort of talking about younger people and people have been, in the workforce for a while, have you seen any either generational differences or tensions when it comes to managing up styles and preferences?
Well, I think the younger generation is still trying to figure it out, as was I, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I don't fault them and go, well, I can't believe you can't figure this out. But so, what I love about Gen Z, and 2 of my children are Gen Z, what I love about this generation is that, they don't care. They'll just speak their mind. And again, I'm from New York. That works for me. Just tell me like it is. Don't make me try to have to figure it out. And I think that's great. And then I remember with the millennials, when I did a lot of work on the generations in the workplace, I interviewed a lot of millennials, and their message was, don't confuse my ability to get work done quickly as laziness.
Hmm.
In other
Hmm.
words, if I was done with my work at 3:45, I'm not sitting here until 5 o'clock, you know, and I'm not
Yes.
lazy. And, I was like, boy, I wish I was like that when I was their age.
Yeah, I noticed that I had an employee who did that, and honestly, it irritated me because I was like, well, if you have more time, I would love more help, not for you to say I'm done, goodbye.
Yeah, but
You
on the
know?
other hand, why am I killing myself here? I'll just take my time. Otherwise, my reward is more work. So I get both
That's
sides of the
true.
coin.
That's so true. So true. Good point. Okay, now I've learned my lesson there too. Okay, when we're reaching one more ad break, when we come back, let's flip it a little bit to managing down and managing to the side a little bit, right? And let me tell you guys, the thing that I love, so interesting and so fun about her book, I read it actually in PDF, and managing up versus managing down, you flip the book one way or another. So this is fun. So we will come back after the ad break. We'll talk about managing down and to the side a little bit. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Roberta Matuson, and we'll be right back in just a moment. Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Roberta Matuson. And Roberta is an expert in managing up, managing down, and all around, succeeding all around. And we've really focused heavily on the managing up piece. Once you have that down, then you can really succeed in all the other places, right? Because you yourself said, if you can't manage up, you can just forget about managing down. I just love that. So one of the things about managing down, especially in today's sort of hybrid and remote workplace, is the challenge that a lot of managers have between the tension of holding people accountable, helping them stay engaged, and helping them manage burnout and feel supported all at the same time. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, the first thing you said was holding people accountable. And unfortunately, what I see happening over and over again, even in the executive ranks, is that leaders are not holding people accountable. And therefore, those people have no idea that their performance isn't up to par. And they're quite shocked when they either get their performance review and they're raised, they don't get one, or they're asked to leave and they have no idea how this happened. And so I think this whole thing about accountability, you really have to look at it as, my person deserves to know how they're doing. And if I ask them to do something, they need to do it. And if they don't do it, I need to hold them accountable. So, and I know that's hard when you've got 20 other people or 20 other things going on, but it's really critical as a leader, to hold your people accountable and be accountable to them. Because if you tell them you're going to do something, you darn well better do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's not just low performers. High performers who are not held accountable end up feeling disengaged because they're like, what's the point? That I'm not feeling challenged. I'm not getting enough interesting opportunities to really, try something that's difficult. And that is not a good thing for high achievers either. Like nobody benefits from not being held accountable.
Right. And I think it's important for leaders to understand that today, the number one thing that people really want is development, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have the ability to get them a coach or to put them in a group coaching program, like the one that you offer or the ones that I offer, I mean, that's like the greatest gift you can give someone. In fact, that reminds me when I was suddenly in charge, my boss gave me a choice. He said, Roberta, you can, hire a team of people. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with them? Because I don't even know what I'm doing. Or you can hire consultants. And then he also gave me a coach. And that was just like life-changing because my coach was helping me navigate the crazy situation that I had found myself in. So, keep in mind what your people today are really looking for. That's really important to them. The idea that
Absolutely.
There's a place to go.
Absolutely. And I'm noticing that definitely with the younger generation is they want to be mentored. They want for you to care about their professional development. They want to make an impact. They want to make a change. And so if you invest in them, they will invest back. But it's that piece for sure. Roberta, last question here is, what do people need to know about managing across the organization? Not up, not down, just across.
Well, these are the people, you're going to need things from. You might need somebody to pay a vendor quickly, okay? Because they're not going to start the work until they're paid. You might need to ask for favors. You might need a check cut. You might need to, there's a million things you might need. And so, if you have relationships with people, you can call in every now and again a favor. But in order to do that, you have to give before you ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yet again, that relationship thing, huh? Helping relationships. We help each other. It doesn't have to be transactional, but there's only one way to feel like you can lean on somebody else and they could lean on you. You're gonna have to develop those trusting relationships.
Yeah, it's all about trust.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And you never know, when you're up for promotion, your boss might come to your peers in other departments and say, what do you think about her? We're looking at possibly promoting her. What's your experience been? You don't want it to be like,
Uh,
you don't want to
either
do
I don't know or gosh,
I hope
I've
you
only
pick someone else. Is this the best you got?
right. Very good point about the promotion implications of your ability to manage up, down, and all around as well, right?
Absolutely.
If you've shared a lot today, what is one thing that you want people to take away from today?
Where we started. Honestly, if you don't manage up, you're not going to have to worry about managing down. And in the beginning, it's going to be very uncomfortable. But I do walk you through everything you need to know about managing up. What I love about the book, it's like you mentioned, it's in two halves. So if that's all you really want to learn, you only have to read that half. And if you don't have a team, wow, you can just in half the time finish the book.
Absolutely. But you know what? It's totally worth it, y'all. Finish both sides. Okay, so where can people find you? And those of you who are watching live right now or the recording later, I'm going to also show you places that you can find Roberta.
Well, they can find me at my website, which you have up, matchisonconsulting.com. They can find me on X at Matchison, and they can find me on LinkedIn. And if they want to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a note, please. I get a ton of requests, and I don't want to say no if I don't know why you're connecting with me. So just say you were listening to our session today, and that will give you a ticket in.
Excellent, excellent. And that is spelled Matuson consulting.com. And you could also find her book on Amazon, Suddenly in Charge, third edition, Managing Up, Managing Down, Succeeding All Around. And she's there too. So, folks, what did you take away from today? And more importantly, what is one small change that you can implement this week based on what you learned from Roberta? Share it with us on LinkedIn at Mira Brancu or Roberta Matuson or talkradio.nyc so we could cheer you on. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, all over the place, but LinkedIn is where I live online and where I will respond. And as Roberta said, she will be very welcoming if you find her there as well and follow her. In addition to being a live show, we're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all over the place. Please help us increase our visibility, reach, and impact by leaving a review, especially on Apple. The stuff that we talk about on the show is part of our research-based strategic leadership pathway roadmap that we also teach in our TowerScope Leadership Academy, a private coaching and learning community for socially conscious leaders in disrupted learning and innovation industries looking to make a greater impact. To learn more and apply, check us out at gotowerscope.com and click on Leadership Academy. And remember to look out for the applications because those are closing on July 19th. Okay. Thank you to talkradio.nyc for hosting. And thank you to Roberta Matuson for joining us today. Do look her book up. Do turn it backwards, all around, inside out to read everything that she shared with you. Thank you for joining us today. And Roberta, I am curious to hear from you in the last 2 minutes here, lightning round. The worst case scenario you've seen of managing up.
Me.
You. And what about the best case scenario? Anything that we should aspire to look up to? Somebody who's done an amazing job. What did they do that was so magical?
Well, one person in particular, one of my clients, she just did an outstanding job of really, developing a relationship with her boss. And she wound up, I'm not exaggerating, getting $100,000 raise without a job title and more responsibility. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Wow. Wow. And anything in particular that she did that was
yeah, she hired me.
Nice.
And I coached her how to ask for a raise and actually get it. But there is a chapter in the book on that. So
yes, we didn't talk about that at all, but there is a chapter in the book on getting a promotion and how to do it. And boy, that is a pretty strong testament to your work in your book. Here,
absolutely.
Yeah. Now, last one. What is the best or worst case scenario that you've seen with managing to the side across a system?
Well, I've seen people do a really good job of doing that, and it just makes their job so much easier. Whenever they need anything, people are pulling for them and they help them out, and they're much less stressed out than other people who, don't know who to talk to. Nobody will respond to their, Slack messages. And, it's not a great situation. They may be their company's best kept secret, which is definitely something you don't want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Best case scenario I have seen is somebody who, technically had, one of the lowest roles in terms of like their pay and how many people they had to report up to and up to and up to and up to. And yet they were phenomenal at developing relationships. They would reach out to people. They would check in. They would say, hey, I'd like to get to know you. I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. They knew a little bit about each person in this organization where everybody had such a positive feeling that it was an easy shoe-in for him to get that next promotion, which he did. And at this point, he's moved up a couple of promotions and probably will be considered for at least one or two more simply because he cared enough to get to know the people around him.
Remarkable
and
how
did it
this
well.
works.
But he did it well, and he did it exceptionally well. It never felt transactional. So if you want to learn more, please do read her book. She details things in such a practical, accessible way in the book. And then if you want to work with her, you know how to contact her and reach out to Roberta Matuson. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day wherever you're tuning in from. Bye, all.